but we did get to see 5 rounds out of Belal Muhammad. And to me, this was the best Belal Muhammad that we have seen to date.
Right.
He was able to really shut down some of the things in Leon's game that he does the best. And I think what Leon does best leading into that fight was his range management and his ability to keep really good fighters, especially good grapplers, good wrestlers, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington. You know, both of those guys probably have a more extensive wrestling pedigree than Belal Muhammad, and he was able to keep them at bay for the most part. And Belal did some things that really shut down that game for Leon. He took the fight right to him. He didn't allow him to do a lot of lateral movement, which is what a wrestler needs to get away from the takedown. Belal did an excellent job of pinning Leon against the cage and working those takedowns from there. Some really beautiful, you know, double leg takedowns. There was a few where Leon was slammed on his head in one of those takedown attempts, or one of those takedowns that was secured. So I want to talk about what Belal did right. And then I do want to touch on what Leon did wrong, because I think Leon didn't show up with the proper game plan for this fight, and he really paid dearly for it. So what were your thoughts, and what do you think Belal did that the other fighters have not been able to do against Leon?
Well, I think after last night, like you were saying earlier, we are going to have to remember the name. Belal Muhammad is now our champion, and he did it in dominant fashion. Leon Edwards looked like a world beater after his last couple of title defenses, and you're like, all right, I don't really see anybody until maybe a Rachmanov or maybe potentially an Ian Gary if he keeps going up the way he's going. I don't see anybody giving Leon a problem until one of those guys comes, and that's simply because of a size thing. I think that those guys are longer and they're decent at striking. They would be able to cause some problems for Leon, but that's not the case. Belal Muhammad went out there with a great game plan, and one thing that stuck out to me from the very first bell was the pressure. And a lot of times we'll hear people talk about pressure fighters, right? You hear that all the time. You're either a pressure fighter, you're a counter striker, whatever it is. If you want to train your fighters to be pressure forward fighters, watch the Belal Muhammad fight. And a lot of times people mistake pressure with volume.
Yes.
They mistake pressure with forcing things. And Belal wasn't really doing that. He was really good at pushing Leon backwards, just like you were saying. Leon was not circling. He was not moving laterally at all. He would move straight backwards. And really from the beginning of the fight, it looked like Leon was flat-footed. And that was a big issue because I knew that Belal Muhammad, having trained with Khabib and already coming into that training camp with a great pedigree of wrestling and grappling, I knew that if Leon wound up near the cage, if he wasn't making adjustments and getting out of there quickly, Belal would eventually find the takedown. I didn't think it was going to be that easy for him to take Leon down, but the reason he had so much success in the takedowns is because of Leon's defense. And what stuck out to me, and you'll see it from time to time, you know, Sean Strickland sort of made it famous, the Philly shell in MMA, and it's a bit of a modified shell, but at the same time, it looks like it. Leon was doing that, but he was doing it in a more defensive way and almost a risky way, because he would bring his hands like this.
Yeah.
And as soon as your hands go like this and you're fighting a wrestler, you have big problems, because the one thing you need to do when somebody changes levels and shoots in on you is your arms got to go down, and you have to start defending the shots. Leon was so concerned about the strikes that were coming because Belal was having more success than I think most people, including Leon's camp, thought he was going to have on the feet. Since he was having so much success, Leon started shelling up that way, which opened up the immediate level change into a clean entrance almost every single time Leon shot. And I'm not saying this was like one of those situations where Leon almost got out of all of them and it just happened to be grappled by a better grappler. No, he was, every time Belal shot, his head was below Leon Edwards' waistline, and his hands every time seemed to grasp together behind Leon's legs. And I don't care if you're, you know, a collegiate level wrestler, or if you're, you know, somebody who's been running the UFC for a very long time. If a wrestler that knows what they're doing gets that much that deep on you, you're in trouble. And Belal Muhammad was able to just find that, it seemed like whenever he wanted to. And a couple of times we saw Leon Edwards get it back to the feet, or after the round ended, we'd see a fresh round start where he was on the feet. But the same thing would happen again and again. He'd get walked backwards and then he'd get put on the ground. And in my opinion, I just think that Belal Muhammad came out with a perfect game plan to tire out Leon Edwards, sort of break him mentally, and then just continue to bring his onslaught of offense and top control and dominant pressure. And that's what won him the fight. Do I think Belal had the best fight of his career? Yes. Do I think Leon Edwards also had one of the worst fights of his career, at least in recent memory? Yes. But I also think that styles make matchups, and Leon Edwards, even if he does get a rematch with Belal Muhammad, which the UFC and me, I'm not really bullish on seeing that happen next. I think they're going to give Leon some time. I think they're also going to insert new blood into the top of the division. So I think Belal is going to be the champ for a little while longer. He's going to fight some different people, get some parity in there, not have an immediate rematch, which is going to be good for both him and Leon Edwards, because now we've seen them fight a couple of times. They're 1-1. There's something to be said for a rubber match, and I think we need to see that at some point. But I'm not really the kind of person that's calling for that immediately. It was a dominant performance for Belal Muhammad. And look, 170, just like that, changes guards, and now we've got a whole new lineup of fights that we could see at the top of the division, especially for the belt. I'm really excited for it, but yeah, Belal Muhammad needs a lot of credit, because even though he was getting boozed the entire night, he came out there, fought like an all-star, and now he's the world champ.
Yeah, and I will correct you on just one thing. They're not 1-1. They're 1-1 because Leon is, at least, because of the no contest. So I think that's why they're not so apt to make this immediate rematch. And it was 25 minutes of a domination. You know, had Belal come out there, and we don't know Belal for knocking people out, obviously, but if he came out there and he were to just get a quick KO of Leon, or something were to happen and he were to get a submission of some kind, I could see them maybe turning it around and doing a rematch, especially if Leon was having a lot of success early on and then just something went wrong. We see that happen, and Leon's been the champ for a little while now, and so he's somebody who would be in the running for getting a rematch. But when you get dominated like that, and yes, I know Leon had a very good third round, and they kind of traded that position in the third and fourth round. You know, Belal came back and put him in the same body triangle that he was in for the third round. And, you know, I think you really laid out what Belal did really well. And I'll just add one or two things to it. One, I think his hand speed surprised Leon. Yeah. And it surprised me.
And his shot selection. Some of those uppercuts were nice and hooks and whatnot.
Yes, absolutely. That uppercut that he landed in the first round really got Leon's attention. And he's like, okay, this guy came to strike.
Right.
I think Leon wasn't really respecting Belal's shots and his striking whatsoever, which I think was a costly mistake, because even from the first bell, Leon usually is a fighter who will come out, he throws a lot of feints, he's long, he's very good behind his jab. His straight punches are some of the best at 170.
Agreed.
But he just stepped right into range with Belal and started trading, which is not Leon's style.
No.
He's not Max Holloway. You know, it's not, they're different fighters, different strikers have different styles.
Right.
And Leon, I believe, is one of the cleanest strikers in the UFC, but he didn't bring that tool with him last night. He just brought kind of a stand and trade mentality, because you're not in my league as far as striking goes.
Right.
And Belal quickly showed him that he's making some real improvements, even at 36 years old, in his striking. And then when you start to get tagged on the feet and you start to bring your hands up, as you said, in a defensive position, or you're shelling or whatnot, then it just opens up the grappler's potential for whatever they want. And we saw some beautiful, you know, entries, level change entries. We saw some high crotches. We saw Leon get slammed on his head at one point, which looked a little bit scary. Yeah, you know, those things we've seen, you know, Rose Namajunas comes to mind. Like those types of things have ended fights before. So I think Belal really was, you know, had a perfect game plan that he executed well. And I know he's not from Dagestan. He's not Islam Makhachev, but he did spend some time with Khabib. And one thing we know about those guys and the way they train is they have a game plan, they have a strategy, and unless they run into just a wall of adversity, they don't veer from it. They do what they came to do. And Belal Muhammad had a far better strategy than Leon Edwards did last night, and he executed it, which is even more important than having the strategy. He executed his game plan far better than Leon did. So I think you're right. I think that Belal Muhammad is probably going to move on to somebody other than Leon. Leon's probably going to have to win one more to get back in there. You know, he was the champion for a couple of defenses, so if he can knock off a top 5 guy.
Maybe a Colby Covington or something.
Yeah, well, yeah, if they want to run that rematch, which I don't see them really doing. I don't see them putting Colby in there for that. Maybe they try to build an Ian Gary off of him or something like that. You know, Leon versus Gary, I think, would give Leon more of that striker stylistic matchup that he's looking for. You know, so I could see them doing something along those lines, but I think Belal is moving on to other people, maybe Shavkat Rakhmonov, which from a stylistic perspective we can break down in a different video.
Give me that all day.
Yeah, I would love to see that fight. I think it would be an excellent